Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, our guest is Jeanette Knill, PKD patient, Tolvapton user, retired physical therapist, school board election winner, Advocacy Champions Network, PKD Advocate, primarily on PKD Research. Jeanette is from Green Bay, Wisconsin. She was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, or PKD, in 2008 at the age of 49. No one else in the family has a PKD, so she considers herself kind of a Ninja Turtle special there. She's learned about Tolvapton trials in Northwestern University in Chicago, same year, 2008. And she applied and she was accepted. As of today, she's been on Tolvapton for over 17 years. At approximately the age of 66, her GFR and creatinine are better than they were before starting Tolvapton. Pain has been rare. Jeanette says, quote, "I am proof that we need research. Without Tolvapton, I most likely would have needed a kidney transplant," unquote. Before the Tolvapton, her kidneys were over 10 times the size they should have been, and the pain was interfering with her work, and her GFR and creatinine were sliding toward bad levels. Jeanette is a retired for about 3 years from a 25 career as a physical therapist. She successfully ran and won for the Green Bay elections as a school board member. Jeanette is a special PKD advocate, particularly in the research space, because she believes it has helped to save her kidneys. Please give a warm welcome to a dedicated PKD advocate. Jeanette Knill is with us tonight. Jeanette, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Jim, and you're doing well?
I'm doing well, thank you. Trying to
Good.
be a good boy. Did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
Yes, yes, you did. I've actually been retired for 4 years in November. The end of
Okay.
November is when I retired. So, and I'm enjoying my retirement. I'm doing a lot of volunteer work, and as you mentioned, I'm on the Green Bay area school board, and that's keeping me busy. I was elected in April, this past April, and yeah, my husband and I, we just got back from a camping trip this afternoon. We were up in northern Wisconsin where the weather is unbelievably beautiful. We had better weather these last few days than we had when we went in the middle of August. So,
You sent me that photograph from the forest, a beautiful picture.
yes, yeah, the trees are starting to turn a little red and yellow. I was out of my kayak and the water was just like glass. It was beautiful. That's the only way I kayak. I don't kayak when there's any white caps or anything. I don't like getting wet.
Don't blame you.
I don't want to be
Please,
tipped out of the boat.
right. Please tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your educational experience, and your employment experiences.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Chicago. And those of you that know the football world probably are saying, but wait a second, she lives in Green Bay now. Yes, I am a Bears fan. But I found out when we moved here 13 years ago that my husband was secretly a Packers fan. We've been married this year, we were married for 48 years. So we've been married a long time. I was 18, he was 20 when we got married. We were just babies. And so then we have a little rivalry in our house now. We call it a house divided between the Packers and the Bears, but we have a lot of fun with it. But I grew up in Chicago, and my family owned and ran a funeral home in Chicago, was in business for 90 years before it closed down in 2019 after my father passed away. And I had a pretty normal childhood. I had a lot of upper respiratory illness. We discovered I had asthma. So I'm blessed with that, but I managed that just fine. And I've had 3 children. They're now in their 40s, 41, 43, and 45. And in 1981, when I had my daughter, they weren't doing ultrasound, so I didn't have any ultrasound that showed PKD. They probably would have shown that I had it, but nobody was doing ultrasound then. It was really new and was only being done for at-risk pregnancies. So we didn't discover at that time. And I was stayed home with my kids when they were young. I had graduated from high school, dropped out of college, and learned how to program computers from my workplace. I was really dating myself when I say I was a key punch operator. I wonder if some of your viewers will even know what that is. But as I was punching in the code, I was learning what the programmer was doing, and I'd say, "Hey, this isn't going to work. You need to change it." And they decided that they needed to turn me into a programmer. So I became a maintenance programmer of mainframe computers. But then when I had my daughter, I dropped out of the workplace and I was home for 11 years. And that's when I decided to go back to school to become a physical therapist. And I graduated from physical therapy with a bachelor's of science in 1996. And yeah, I worked a lot in geriatrics, some orthopedics. And my final 9 years up here in Green Bay, I was doing working with women, pregnant women, and postpartum women, and on problems that women have after pregnancy, like incontinence and pain and things like that. So that's how I ended my career. But it was a good fit for me as a physical therapist. I really enjoyed it, and I was able to contribute a lot. I had a lot of students, and it was very enjoyable. Though for a couple years, right after I was diagnosed with PKD, I was having trouble doing my job because I was having a lot of pain. And one thing I was using to control the pain, because you can't be taking pain meds and going to work, I was using something called a TENS unit that a lot of physical therapists use for pain control, and that was helping me with my pain levels. I would wear that at work, and then I didn't have to take pain medication.
Okay. I understand that you were diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, or PKD, in 2008. Can you tell us how that diagnosis came about?
Sure. Well, like I said, I never had ultrasounds during my pregnancy, so nobody had ever looked at my innards, and I was a pretty healthy person. I didn't have any reason for any imaging. So I started to have some pain on my right flank, and my primary care doctor thought it was my gallbladder. So I went in and he did an ultrasound of my gallbladder, and it was perfectly fine. But the ultrasound technician said to me, "I need you to roll on your left side." And I immediately, because physical therapists have the same anatomy class that physicians have, I had my anatomy class along with med students. I knew that my gallbladder wasn't on my right side, that she was having me lay on my left side because she wanted to look at something else on my right side. And I said, "So what's wrong with my liver?" And she's like, "Oh, nothing's wrong with your liver. We're just looking at your gallbladder." And I said, "No, you're not. What are you looking at? My kidneys? What's wrong with my kidneys?" And she didn't really say much. She said, "You have to talk to your doctor," because the ultrasound tech can't say anything. And yeah, that's how I found out. Then I went for an MRI that showed both kidneys were full of cysts and enlarged. My right kidney was already down close to my pelvis. My left kidney was very wide, football shape. My right kidney was elongated, where was quite interesting to see the pictures of them. And so that's how we discovered it. I have no family members. My mom has had imaging because she had her gallbladder removed, I don't know, when she was 50, 60 years old. And so her kidneys were perfectly fine. When my father passed away, they said that his kidneys were not enlarged, but he had several cysts in both kidneys. So maybe he had PKD that was undiagnosed, because when he was young, he also had some things that go along with PKD. And his mother had a lot of things, a lot of bowel issues. And my dad had an aneurysm, and he had some heart valve issues. And some of those things can go along with PKD. And so perhaps that's where they got it. I haven't had any genetic testing. But we were really surprised because I had had hypertension in my mid 30s. And I went to a very good obstetrician gynecologist. And my weight was good. My husband and I cycle hundreds of miles. And I was in very good shape. And she couldn't understand why I had high blood pressure. And so she sent me to a nephrologist at that time. I was probably more in my early 40s than in my 30s. The nephrologist did testing, but never did any imaging because I had no family history. So she did some testing.
Jeanette, I can't hear you. Did you hit a mute button somewhere?
Well, I didn't.
Oh, that's better.
I didn't think. There we go. I was muted. I'm not sure how that happened. But you can hear me now.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and I was telling you about my doc that sent me to my nephrologist early on, and she didn't do any imaging. So when we found that about 8 years later, when we found out that I had PKD, I went back to the same nephrologist, and she felt terrible that she never did any imaging. And I said, well, why would you have? First of all, you couldn't have done anything for me because there's no treatment for PKD. And we don't have any family history. So you did the right thing. She treated my high blood pressure with the medication. It went down to normal and everything was fine for many years. And so if I didn't have that pain that looked like a gallbladder attack, then who knows when it would have been discovered. But yeah. And now we do have treatment. We have the Tolvapton. So at the time, we didn't have that.
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us about your experiences with the Tolvapton trials at Northwestern University in Chicago. You started in 2008. I understand that you applied and were accepted. Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
So to get into a clinical trial, the first thing I did when I found out that I had PKD, because it is somewhat of a rare disease, I looked on clinicaltrials.gov for any kind of clinical trial that would pertain to PKD. And I was blessed to find that at Northwestern, they were part of a multi-center trial. The Tolvapton trials were going on around the entire world, not just at Northwestern. They were also at Mayo Clinic. There were some hospitals or universities down in Florida. There were some on the East Coast, some on the West Coast. There were some trials going on in Europe and Japan, because that's where Otsuka, the company, is in Japan. And so this was a wide trial. there were, of course, criteria to get in the trial. You had to have kidneys that were a certain size. I do not recall the size that they had to be, but they had to be larger than normal. You had to have a history of high blood pressure. You had to be 50 or younger. So I just squeaked in there at 49. And then you had to go in for a lot of testing. They did MRIs, they did heart testing. I went for 3 or 4 weeks in a row where I got an ECG every time I went in. I had so many blood tests that the one time they poked my vein collapsed, and they had to go into my other arm, and that collapsed. And so they had to go into my foot. And I had never had that happen, but they were just taking so much blood out of my arms every week that it got a little crazy. But that was only for a very short time. Then once they decided that I was, I met the criteria and I could be in the study, then that was what's called a double-blind study. So you didn't know if you were on the medication or not. That was the third iteration of the trial. So when they decide to look at a medication, the first thing they have to do is make sure that the medication isn't going to kill the people that are on it. That was already done. That's the first iteration. Then they need to have the second iteration that determines, well, what's the dosage? What are we going to give these people? And that was already done. And so I was in the third iteration, which is, now let's look at this against a placebo, a sugar pill, basically, and see if this is effective for a lot of people. And there were thousands of people in this trial, as I said, across the world, not just in the United States. So I was put on the 90-30 dose right away. I never started with the 15 or the 40. I don't know if everybody was started with the 90-30 dose. And initially, I didn't know if I was on the drug or not. They didn't tell us that until this trial was 100% completed, and that was about 5 years. But I was having all the symptoms they were talking about. The excessive thirst, the needing to urinate every 25 or 30 minutes initially. It was pretty intense. And I was still working full time. At the time, I was working more in a management position than in a clinical position. So my employer was very kind and took me out of my clinical position. So I was just doing management. So I had the flexibility that I could go to the bathroom when I needed to. I could drink as much water as I needed to. As a clinician, you can just think about it. You're with a patient and you're doing things, especially as a physical therapist, and I'm moving and exercising with a person or moving their body around or that kind of thing. And you can't just say, oh, wait here, I'm going to go to the bathroom and then come back. It just doesn't work like that. So I was lucky that way. But I tolerated that 90-30 pretty good. After about 6 months, things started to go back to more manageable, where I didn't have to urinate every 20, 30 minutes. I was able to wait an hour and a half to 2 hours, but I was drinking a lot. I still drink a lot. I drink about a gallon of liquid, a lot of water. Yeah, my thirst is pretty significant, but I've learned that's my new normal. I've learned how to take care of that. I can't eat as much salt because the drug causes you to retain sodium. That's one thing about Tolvapton. And if you don't drink enough water or you eat too much sodium, then your sodium levels in your body increase. And that can cause you to have edema and other issues. The other thing they watch is your liver function, because Tolvapton can really affect your liver. So when I was on the trials, I had to go every month for the first, it seemed like it was a long time, maybe the first year of the study. And then it went to every couple months. I lived in Chicago at the time, so it wasn't a big deal. I was able to get off work. So that wasn't a big deal. And so for me, it was worthwhile. And like I said, my employer was kind. And being a healthcare provider, I think they understood the importance of it. And so, but now I pretty much sleep through the night. I take my drug first thing in the morning, early as I can, usually by 6. So that means my second dose I'm taking by 2. And so I go to bed at 9:30, something like that. So already that second dose is through my system. So I'm not getting up that much. Initially, I was getting up 2-3 times a night, but not anymore. My body's used to it. And some nights I sleep through the night, even with thirst. I drink water before I go to bed. But also being a pelvic floor physical therapist, I learned things that I taught my patients to help with controlling my bladder a little bit. So that helps too. But the Tolvapton, I would encourage anybody who is talking to their physician about it to really not be shied away because of the side effects of the thirst and the increased urination. Your body gets used to it. Takes about 6 months. It's working well for me. And if it doesn't work for you, you go off of it. And then things will go back to normal. The one thing they don't know is if you go off of it, what happens if you go back on? And we don't know that because nobody's done that. And I don't know how many people have been on it as long as me. And nobody from Otsuka is calling me and saying, hey, we want to find out how you're doing. You've been on it a long time. So I guess that's not important.
Well, just for the record, my notes are telling me you've been on Tolvapton for what, 17 years now?
Right, 17 years. Yeah. And so I'm sure there's other people who are in the study who are still on it. I have met a few through there's a Facebook page for Tolvapton patients that I usually just read the posts. Sometimes I contribute if they're asking something I know, but for the most part, I'm just reading it. And there aren't very many people on there who were in the studies. There's a couple, but not, or I mean, they may be on that, but they're not contributing. They're not stepping up and saying, oh yeah, I've been on it a long time. So my nephrologist who's at Froedtert in Milwaukee, and they're not a center of excellence, but Froedtert does a lot of transplants. And he has a lot of PKD patients, and he doesn't have any other patients that were in the trials. So I'm his only patient in the trial, but they didn't do a trial at Froedtert. Maybe if I was at UW-Madison, where they were part of the cohort of universities that were part of the trial, maybe Madison might have some, or if I had stayed at Northwestern, and I could have stayed at Northwestern with the nephrologist there, but then I would have had to travel back to Chicago for my care, and I wanted my care closer to home. And I go to Milwaukee. I don't stay in Green Bay because there just isn't a nephrologist who's familiar with Tolvapton. And so that's why I go to Milwaukee. So little
okay.
drive,
one of the things you wrote me about was the biggest challenge for you with Tolvapton has been insurance coverage. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experiences with that?
Yeah, so Tolvapton is a pretty expensive drug. I've seen on my EOBs, when I had commercial insurance through my employer, that they were paying $20,000 a month for the drug. I don't know anybody who can afford $20,000 a month for any drug. And do they negotiate down a price? I don't know how pharmaceuticals work. That's not part of my expertise. But when I was on my commercial insurance with my employer, they were covering my Tolvapton, and I was paying a $10 copay. That was it. I didn't pay the $10 copay because that's what my insurance required. I had a card from Otsuka that I could pay only $10. And so I know that there's other drugs that they do that with as well. But when I retired, and I wasn't old enough yet, I retired at 62, so I couldn't get on Medicare for a couple years. And so I had to go to the marketplace. And luckily there was the Affordable Care Act, which I went to. Initially, I paid for Cobra because I was so concerned that I would lose my Tolvapton coverage, because I had looked at the plans on the Affordable Care Act and none of them covered Tolvapton. I reached out to advocates, insurance people in the community that help you with determining what's good on the marketplace for you. And Tolvapton wasn't a covered drug. And so I sucked it up and paid the high premium for Cobra until the end of the year. And then when I went on the marketplace and I said, okay, I talked to my nephrologist and he's like, we're going to get you the drug one way or the other, but you might be off of it for a while. And so I signed up for the same company that I was getting my drug through from work. I signed up for the same insurer. It's called Health Partners. I think they're only in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and I don't think they're in Indiana, and I don't think they're in Illinois. So I signed up with Health Partners again, and I said I was on this drug, and they looked at and well, we don't cover that drug. And so the specialty pharmacy, which was Optum RX, my nephrologist, and the advocates from Otsuka all helped me to get my insurance to cover the drug and honor the $10 card from Otsuka. So I only had to pay $10, but I was off the drug for about 3 weeks. So it was a little scary because I thought, oh, I'm doing so well on this thing and now I'm going to lose it. And so I made so many phone calls and talked to so many people. My physician's office was fabulous. And the pharmacy person at Optum RX, I talked to this one woman who sort of talked me off the cliff, so to speak. I was very upset that I was going to lose the drug, and she was so very, very kind. And there's a lot of people who have drugs like this, and we always work it out. If your insurance doesn't let you have it, it's going to be worked out. Otsuka has a foundation, and I did talk to them about it, and they said, well, you have private insurance, and if they say they're going to cover it, then it's going to go through there. And it worked out. When I went on to Medicare didn't cover it either. But that wasn't even a discussion. Otsuka, the foundation, now covers my medication. I don't pay anything for my medication at all now. It's all through the foundation because my income has come down. And and they know that Medicare doesn't cover the drug. So that was good. That's really good. They do have a foundation, and I know they work on a sliding scale. Again, on that Facebook page, some people have talked about that they have to pay, maybe $200 a month for their drug, but they do, which $200 a month sounds like a lot, but it's better than $20,000 a month.
Yes.
And if the drug is working for you, it's far less than a kidney transplant. And that's the one thing that my doctor and the OptumRx and the foundation were saying to my insurance company, look, she's got data that shows that this drug is working for her. We don't know what'll happen if she goes off the drug, because why is a drug company going to study what happens when you go off the drug? If they study that, oh, you do fine when you go off the drug, they're not going to sell as much drug. So they don't want to know that. They want you to be on the drug because, they're making money. And maybe there's a researcher who would like to know that, but they need to get their research funded. And so getting research funded can be very difficult, as you and I know, Jim, when we call on Advocacy Day and we talk to our legislators about funding the that's through the defense fund. I think we're always asking for them to do, but look at how things have been cut with NIH and other research.
Department of Defense, yeah.
Right. And research to universities, a lot of it comes from the federal government. And we don't want all the drugs to be funded by the drug companies because they're only going to fund drugs that are going to make them money. We want drugs to be funded and special testing and all that. My husband has Parkinson's and he was diagnosed at 40. And he's been in a lot of research studies for Parkinson's. And actually, one of the research studies that he was in was for determining how to diagnose Parkinson's, because it's one of those diseases that the best way to diagnose this is after death and an autopsy. But they can do some imaging to see the part of the brain that causes Parkinson's. But the imaging is very, very expensive. And so insurance doesn't cover it. So even though they found in this research study that the imaging can diagnose Parkinson's sooner, because it's not funded by insurance, it's not paid for by insurance, only a select number of people say, yeah, I'll pay the money, whatever it is. So they're not using it on a regular basis, which is unfortunate. But we need to have research that's going to be affordable for people, that we're going to use it. And something like Tolvapton, it's working. And not just for me, it's working for other people too. I don't know what the stats are on it, but it is being prescribed. So that's good. That's really good.
We know a little bit about your stats, though, since you've been on Tolvapton. Can you talk to us about your creatinine, your GFR? Have you had problems?
Since I've been on the Tolvapton, I really haven't had any issues. Before I knew, when I was in my early 40s, as I had mentioned, when I was first diagnosed with high blood pressure, and my physician was like, don't know what's going on. We're sending you to a nephrologist that specializes in hypertension. And she saw that I had protein in my urine, which is a sign of kidney issues. And I had creatinine that was like 1.3, and that wasn't good. And my estimated GFR was lower than it should have been. It was around 60. And so once I was on the blood pressure medication, that helped the inflammation in the kidneys go down, because your kidneys control your blood pressure. And if the blood pressure is too high, that's going to cause the structure of the kidney to become inflamed. And then that can cause all those things to happen, the high creatinine, the protein in the urine, and the estimated GFR to be lower than it should be. So once we got that under control, my numbers didn't go down, but they didn't go up, because my nephrologist said, you know, your creatinine is slowly rising, and we saw over several months that it continued to rise until we got the right combo of blood pressure medication and brought my blood pressure down. My blood pressure was like 200 over 100.
Ooh.
Yeah. And as I said, I was an avid cyclist. We hike. My weight was normal. I wasn't obese. I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't eating McDonald's every single day for every single meal. I ate well. And that's where it was actually my gynecologist who said, something's not right. This isn't right. Something's wrong with your kidneys. And but like I said, there was no imaging and no family history, so nobody suspected PKD. But we were able to get those numbers at least stable. So when I went into that trial, to the Tolvapton trial, and this is something that a lot of people say when they first go on Tolvapton, my numbers did jump a bit and my estimated GFR did go down a bit. It was down around 55, 50. Oof. Yeah, it went down. And then my creatinine was up a bit, a little closer to 2. It never hit 2. But once I was on the Tolvapton for, I don't recall all the numbers and when all that happened, but things started to reverse. And in the last, gosh, it's got to be 10 years now, since I've lived here in Green Bay, and I've lived here for 13 years, my numbers have been very good, because, and that was sort of, the trials were ending. So I was in that third iteration of the Tolvapton trial. And then anybody who was in that who wanted to stay on, then they did an open label study. So the drug I was on, the first study I was in, the third iteration, that was a double blind, as I said. And so you didn't know if you were on the drug or not. When that study completed I think that study went on for 3 years. When that was completed, then Otsuka said, we're going to continue to study it because the FDA hadn't approved. So, but you knew you were on the drug. And then shortly after that, they told the people who were on the placebo that they were on placebo, and told the people that were on the drug that they were on the drug. So I know I was not on the placebo in that first study that I was in, that I was on the drug. And that's all the studies. I think there were 4 total before the FDA approved it. And that was about 10 years that I was taking the drug in a study situation. I got the best healthcare. As I said, I could call those doctors anytime. I could go in and see them, because they didn't want me to die on their study. That doesn't look good when you have people dying on your study. Yeah. And I had blood tests and MRIs and EKGs, and didn't go through my insurance because it was all part of the study. Because Otsuka was funding, that was all being funded by the drug company. That wasn't coming out of the NIH or any of those. But they were very good about the funding, at least at Northwestern. And I don't know if that was all because of the chief investigator, who is the head physician that runs the study, if that was because of the university that it was so well run. But since I don't know anybody from any of the other facilities that were running the study. I don't know. I know the drug was approved in Japan several years before it was approved in the US, and it was approved somewhere in Europe before it was approved in the US. But the FDA finally approved it, and it's under something that's called a REM. I don't remember what REM stands for, but that doesn't matter. What a drug that's under REM, the physician and the patient both have to go through sort of education. It is education, but you sort of have to take a test. The physician has to take a much deeper test than the patient.
God,
The
let's
patient
hope
has
so.
to, yeah. But the physician has to do this. Otherwise, they can't prescribe the medication. Only doctors who have gone through this REM program can prescribe the medication. So if your nephrologist doesn't go through the REM program and you want to try Tolvapton, you have to find a nephrologist that can prescribe it. I think at any big facility, you're gonna find it. Maybe at a rural hospital where you don't have those specialists. And rural medicine is getting harder and harder these days to attract any physicians. And you might have to travel a little bit if you want to get on Tolvapton, but it's worth a try. So every year I get sent a little test. It's not a big deal because it's open book and open Google. And it's just that I have to check off that I know that I need to have my blood tested every quarter, 4 times a year. And that's under my expense. My insurance does cover it. I have a small copay. If you have trouble paying for that, though, you can ask Otsuka through their foundation. If you qualify and you fill out, like I did for the drug, I filled out a form and I had to tell them how much money I make. And, but I'm getting the drug for nothing. But I can afford to pay for my blood test. But if you can't, they can help you out with that too. They do that to check for your liver. So that was one of the things for the FDA to approve it. They said you have to have these blood tests every quarter to check for liver dysfunction, and patients and doctors have to go through this REM education. So it's just a little something that I have to do, and my physician does it. And I'm sure it counts for some of his continuing education, because I'm sure for his license he needs to have some. I used to have, as a physical therapist, I had to have 40 hours a year of continuing education. So I'm sure a physician has to have at least that, if not more. Yeah. So
My notes are telling me that your current numbers, at least the most recent stuff that I have, your creatinine is 0.9.
Yep.
And your GFR is 70.
Yep.
And those numbers are wonderful.
Those numbers. So I just had a video visit with my nephrologist, because Milwaukee is 2 hours away from Green Bay, and we agreed that every other year I would go see him in person unless I had an issue. And I see my primary care physician, who is in touch with my nephrologist if need be. So it's not like having a video visit is that big of a deal. And he also knows that as a physical therapist, I know how to watch for certain things, like if I have edema or those kinds of things. So at my last video visit, and he looked at my blood work, and I also happen to have my lipid profile, because I'm going to be seeing my primary in a couple days. And so my dreaded cholesterol that I struggle with has nothing to do with my kidneys. It's just cholesterol that I struggle with. And it was finally lower because we're eating really, really well. We've cut out a lot of red meat and other things that cause your cholesterol to go up, and eating a lot more fish and a lot more veggies and fruits. Not 100% vegetarian, but very close to it. And that's made a big difference in my lipid profile, but also it helps with blood pressure. It helps with controlling my kidneys, because it's not putting a strain on my body. And when you do too much to put a strain on, no matter what medication you're going to take, sometimes that can affect it. Not that you're causing it, but and every once in a while you have to have an ice cream cone. Or we just went camping, and when we go camping, we always have bacon. Bacon is probably one of the worst things that I could have because it's so high in sodium, but it tastes so darn good. So we don't go camping that often. So one breakfast, we make bacon. We have bacon and eggs outside over the fire, and it's so good. So, but now I won't have bacon the whole winter. I will have to wait till next summer, because we probably won't get out camping again until the summer next year. So every once in a while, you got to be able to cheat. But my numbers are very, very good. 0.9. Wow. I mean, in 2008, before I had a definitive diagnosis, it was 1.5.
Such a difference.
Such a difference. And the doctor looks at my kidney size, and I used to know the volume off the top of my head. It's well over 1,000, and for both kidneys combined. And I don't remember what it is, but I bet if I had those kidneys removed, which I don't want to have done because they're functioning, but if I did, I'd probably lose 10 pounds. Easy. And the EGFR is great. I mean, it is estimated, but that's pretty good. They've been doing that for a long time. So it's pretty accurate. So I'm really happy with that. And pain level, I don't know if we talked about that much. You and I talked about it off mic,
yeah.
but I was having a lot of discomfort. My right kidney has always given me more discomfort than my left kidney. That was what drove me to get the ultrasound for the gallbladder, because we thought it was my gallbladder. And I was having a lot of back pain again, and that pain was radiating into my right hip. And I knew I had some problems with my right hip, some arthritis in there. And so the nephrologist and the orthopedic doc talked, and they said, well, the pain could be coming from the kidney, because my right kidney goes all the way down into my pelvis and is lying on top of one of my hip muscles, my hip flexor, that when you bring your knee up to your chest, it's on that muscle. And that was when I was having most of my pain. But if you have hip arthritis, you have a lot of pain when you're bending your hip like that too. So what was it? Was it the fact that I needed a hip replacement because I had an arthritic hip? Or was it that my kidney was causing so much pressure that I couldn't walk, I couldn't bend, I basically couldn't move? I was using a cane, much to my displeasure. I did not like walking with a cane, and I was refusing to walk with a walker, though a physical therapist I was seeing, because even though I'm a physical therapist, you can't treat yourself, but a physical therapist I was seeing said to me, Jeanette, you really should be using a walker. You walk terrible, even with that cane. And I wasn't going to do that because I'm not an old lady. So I decided to have the hip replacement, and I'm really happy that I did. Even though I was very, very concerned that being under anesthesia, and but my orthopedic doctor understood the little additional risk. It wasn't a lot of risk because my kidneys are functioning. They're functioning very well. So my risk of being in surgery for my hip wasn't that big of a risk, that if my GFR was down low and my creatinine was up high, that would have been a big risk for kidney failure. So the only thing that the nephrologist said is I could not take any ibuprofen. After a hip replacement, they often give you a large, very large dose of ibuprofen to decrease inflammation and help control pain. And I couldn't have that. So in the hospital, right after surgery, it was an outpatient surgery, but right after, they had to give me fentanyl. And usually they don't give people fentanyl. And I tolerated that okay. But that was just one dose. So I slept out when I got home, which was fine. And they also allowed me to take Celebrex on a very limited basis, and because that's not quite as bad as ibuprofen, but it's still not great for your kidneys. But again, my kidneys are functioning fine. So as long as they didn't see the numbers increasing taking the Celebrex, I was okay. And Tylenol and ice and a little bit of movement, and my back pain went away. My kidney pain went away. Not kidney pain, my hip pain went away. Every once in a while, I have a little pain up in my rib cage, and it's probably from my kidneys, but it's nothing. It's like if you stub your toe and for a few seconds you're in agony and then it's gone, like almost right away gone. So I really don't have any pain anymore. But even after starting the Tolvapton, my pain went down quite a bit. That's another thing that the Tolvapton did besides made my numbers look better. It also decreased my pain a lot. I had mentioned at the beginning of our talk that I was using a TENS unit, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulator, to help control my pain when I was at work before I had started on the Tolvapton. And that my pain levels went down a lot. It took about 8 months of being on the medication before it helped. But because of the suppression of the cysts forming, which is what Tolvapton does, it's supposed to help suppress the cyst formation. It helped my pain levels go down. So that was really good. So that's another good reason for people to be thinking, if they're thinking about going on Tolvapton, it could help your pain levels.
Good. We're in the home stretch here, Jeanette. Do you have any final statements that you wish to make to our audience before we conclude the broadcast for the evening?
I would say that if they're newly diagnosed with PKD, find out everything that you can. Go on the PKD Foundation, attend their webinars, talk to people like Jim. You can reach out to me. Jim can share my contact email. And the thing is, don't give up hope. And I know a lot of people have family members that have struggled with it. Jim, you've talked about your family and how they've struggled, but things are changing. Thank goodness things are changing. And if the doctor offers you to go on Tolvapton, don't be afraid. Try it. And yeah, maybe you're going to be peeing a lot and really thirsty for a few months, but you'll get used to it. Your body will adjust. And it helped me. I'm not getting paid by Otsuka. And even if I had to pay for my drug, they're kindly giving it to me because my insurance doesn't cover it. But I would still say the same thing. It's worth trying, because if you go off of it, there's no lingering effects to it. I would say, that it's worth it to try it. And if there's also other trials that are going on, look on clinicaltrials.gov and see what's going on. They're researching another drug that's similar to Tolvapton, but it doesn't have the same side effects. I don't know where it is in the pipeline. They're also looking at something that you take in addition to the Tolvapton that helps decrease the symptoms. I don't know where it's going on that. PKD Foundation probably has a lot of information on those, and I did not look at them before Jim and I started to talk today. So, don't be afraid of going into a clinical trial. It's worthwhile.
All right. Well,
thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate you coming on and educating us tonight and sharing your story and the interesting information on Tolvapton. That's priceless.
Well,
Just
I'm glad that I
priceless.
was able to share that with people and let them know that it's worth it, because it is scary. When I went into that trial, I was giving up my life basically, and saying, okay, go ahead. You've proven that it's safe, but we don't know if it works, or, am I going to start growing horns out of my head, or, have seriously weird rashes, or things that you're not going to like. But the other thing about a research trial is you can always stop. You can stop at any time and walk away from it. They don't control you. They don't own you. So it's worthwhile. Take the leap.
All right. Well, Jeanette, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us. I have to button up a couple of things with my audience about who's going to be on
Alrighty.
next week, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for taking time, and I'll be creating a broadcast replay. I'll send the link to you. Please share.
I will. Thank you, Jim. Take care. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate so very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. All right, everybody, that's our broadcast for the evening. Next week, our guest is Father Bob. The father is a brother to Suzanne Rupp. He's going to talk about kidney disease and his and Suzanne's family. Pretty extensive group there, by the way. So it should be an interesting broadcast. I thought the broadcast tonight was fascinating. A lot of information on Tolvapton, if that's what you've been looking for. So I appreciate you taking time, and I will see you next week.